What is post-traumatic slave syndrome? Post-traumatic slave syndrome is a concept introduced by Dr. Joy Leary that explains the multi-generational trauma and repercussions experienced by both African Americans and whites as a result of slavery. In Dr. Leary's lecture discussing this topic, she emphasized the lasting effect that slavery has had due to its lack of being addressed. As seen through this interview, Dr. Leary believes that this topic not being addressed has continued the trauma.
100 years of trauma, no help, freed. No help, more trauma. If it's a sustained trauma, then the impact of that is also sustained.
The failure to address the institution of slavery, unlike other historical genocides like Japanese internment and the Holocaust, as a result continues these biases to be ingrained into the white American psyche. However, many white Americans rationalize this argument by distancing themselves from slavery and arguing that they should not be held accountable for the atrocities that they didn't personally commit. But what many white Americans fail to realize is that they were raised upon these sentiments for generations by their ancestors who themselves possess a cognitive dissonance. The legacy of slavery has been passed down for generations and has perpetuated a mindset that has yet to be fully addressed. Furthermore, many influential white historical figures have dehumanized African Americans publicly, which has contributed to the cognitive dissonance that still exists today. Since white Americans were committing such terrible atrocities to slaves such as torture, forced labor, and rape, in order to rationalize with themselves, society perpetuated tons of horrible lies about African Americans. For instance, a figure that many white Americans looked up to, a physician named James Marion Sims, reasoned that slaves were able to endure great pain because their race made them more durable. He used this to justify horrible experiments he committed on African Americans. Spreading lies such as these was extremely dangerous at this time, and also was very influential because few people were educated. Additionally, Reverend John Newton, who was a well-respected figure at this time where religion was at the forefront of many Americans' lives, said that slaves are lesser creatures without Christian souls who are not worthy of enduring the next world. Many people saw God as divine punishment at this time, so perpetuating a concept like this was very dangerous towards African Americans. This example of cognitive dissonance directly ties into the artifact that I've created. In this image, there is a white man staring into a mirror with a feigned smile and a sorrowful expression as he has tears in his eyes. Also, if you take note of the mirror, there is an angry and mean expression that looks back at him. This speaks to cognitive dissonance and the lack of ability to look in the mirror by white Americans. Many white Americans believe that if they ignore the existence of slavery, then they don't have to look at themselves in the mirror and think about their repercussions that they need to make for the past. But this lack of acknowledgement and reparations is very dangerous as it normalizes the sentiments of the past and keeps them alive. It's not enough to be indifferent to slavery, you have to be anti-slavery in modern day. Furthermore, Dr. Leary gives an example of how sentiments from generations ago affect people to this day. This example particularly is on how African American mothers are tough on their children.
If I were to ask, is she very proud while she's saying those denigrating things? And everybody laughs and goes, of course, there's a secret. Because everybody black knows that even though the black mother is going, oh my God, she's really proud. So now let's roll that scene back 300 years. And let's say this black mother is working in the fields and a white slave owner comes through and says, wow, that boy is really coming along. What is she gonna say? No, he's not. He's stupid. He's shiftless. He can't work because I don't want you to sell him. So I denigrate them to protect them.
This example of how slavery affects African American mothers in modern day touches on the multi-generational trauma African Americans feel due to slavery. Because of the widespread propaganda in the public eye at that time, as a result, many stereotypes about African Americans came into fruition. Black people were characterized as criminals, lazy, and illiterate. These horrible stereotypes still follow us to this day. As a result, many Black Americans feel imposter syndrome as they don't feel worthy of success due to societal borders that Americans have placed on them. Furthermore, in an attempt to prove their literacy, Black Americans have to work twice as hard to be afforded the same opportunities as white Americans. In this TED Talk, Dawn Reese speaks about blackface, along with other racial stereotypes perpetuated by whites, and the psychological effects it has had on Black people.
Blackface minstrelsy was born out of the realities of slavery and racial segregation, and its continual reappearance echoes the pain and suffering felt by Black people whose bodies and cultures were presented as strange and grotesque. It is a persistent reminder of the racism and prejudices that bred its very existence. The way it infiltrated society is a clear example of how deeply ingrained racism is in this country. And the racial subjugation embodied by blackface minstrelsy and perpetuated through a continuum of its history is a form of aggression, a psychic wound that refuses to heal. Racial impersonation of any form cannot escape this legacy.
Overall, through exploring the concept of post-traumatic slave syndrome, Dr. Leary has shed light on the unaddressed historical trauma of slavery in modern day, which has led to cognitive biases. The stereotypes perpetuated during slavery continue to shape perceptions, and ultimately, perceptions shape someone's reality. This has caused black people to often feel burdened by imposter syndrome and make them feel unworthy. So the damage done by historical figures like James Marion Sims and Reverend John Newton, perpetuating cognitive dissonance through dehumanizing African Americans, still exists. Therefore, reparations are necessary to be made in present day. Furthermore, as seen in my visual artifact, many white Americans are still unable to confront the mirror of their history. Ignoring the existence of slavery builds a culture of denial and normalizes sentiments from the past. Ultimately, the effects of post-traumatic slave syndrome are intertwined with the experiences of both African Americans and whites and shapes how we perceive the world. I believe the only way to work towards getting rid of post-traumatic slave syndrome for both peoples is to first acknowledge the institutions of slavery and then work towards building reparations. We need to acknowledge that these racist and horrible stereotypes created in the past, and we need to also work towards reframing African Americans as strong and intelligent people who are deserving of all the success they receive. Furthermore, by taking responsibility and building reparations, we'll begin to break the deeply ingrained racist psyche in white Americans and build towards a more just future. Overall, I believe coming together and taking responsibility is the first step in eliminating post-traumatic slave syndrome.